Hello everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to be sharing what I've read so far this month. So let's get started. The first book that I want to talk about is A Thing of Beauty by Lisa Sampson, and this was one of the Christian fiction novels that I found while searching the shelves at the library, and I'm glad that I picked it up. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and I will say this is not your typical Christian fiction book. You will not find any mention of God. There are no scripture references or characters sending up silent prayers or going to visit the local pastor. A few of the characters do also use profanity, so you will see words like damn and hell in this book. So if that is not something that you are interested in or not something that you want to see when you pick up a book that is labeled Christian fiction, I would probably say to avoid this one. But I personally still got something from this, and I think if you look closely enough, you can still see elements of faith. I really enjoyed Fiona. I thought she was a character who had some really tough things happen to her in her life, and she attempted to heal on her own, and that doesn't really work, but she is surrounded by this wonderful group of friends, and they allow Fiona to be herself, and they are supportive of her, and they accept her just as she is. And I think that that high level of support helps Fiona begin to heal, and that's not even something I think she realizes she needs at the start of the book. So I personally really enjoyed this, and I got a lot from it, and I think if you give this a chance, you would probably like it too. Next, I have Save Me a Seat by Sarah Weeks and Geeta Varadarajan, and this was another one that I loved. I ended up giving it 5 stars. I think one of my favorite parts of this book was that Ravi and Joe's relationship did not follow the typical storyline. They didn't meet and become best friends right away. Their friendship took some time. So throughout the book, you see their stories kind of paralleling each other, and then towards the end, they begin to converge. And I really like that about this book, because it was nice to see, you know, Ravi go through his own issues and then kind of come to his own conclusions, and the same thing with Joe. You also get a good sense of Ravi's culture in this book, which was really nice to see, you know, how his life differed from being in India where he was born and has lived up until this point when the book starts, and it's the first day of 5th grade. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. It's a good look at, you know, teaching us how to accept our own differences and accepting the differences in others. And just because someone is different doesn't make them any less. And so this is another one that I would highly recommend. I personally loved it, and it's a quick read because it's so tiny. I also picked up Liar and Spy by Rebecca Stead, and I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. Now, George and Safer do follow the typical path. They meet and hit it off right away. I thought that Safer in the beginning was a bit of a pain. I thought he was a bit too pushy, but as the story progresses, you do begin to see why he is the way that he is and kind of where he's coming from. So I think that he did grow on me as the story went on. I really enjoyed George. I thought he was, you know, straight to the point and very matter of fact. And, you know, he doesn't really see things, you know, as in between. It's very black and white for George. But I do think as the story progresses, he does begin to change his thinking and kind of accept differences for what they are and appreciate them. But I thought that the author did a great job in crafting this story. There are some twists at the end that you don't really anticipate, and that always makes for a good story when you can't really figure out where the author's going. But I really enjoyed this one, and it was a bit of a surprise, so I'm glad that I picked it up. I also picked up My Name is Leon by Kit DeWall, and I haven't written a Goodreads review for this one yet, but I do think when I do, I'll probably end up giving this one 3 stars. I enjoyed the storyline and the plot. I thought it was well written. I just think towards the middle, it got a bit boring, and I just wanted it to get to the end so I could see whatever the resolution was. So in the end, I think that this one was probably 50 to 100 pages too long. But I did enjoy the ending. It wasn't exactly what I was hoping would happen, but I think it was a nice compromise for Leon. My biggest issue with this book was you have this child who is taken away from his mother along with his brother. And then, as the synopsis says, his brother ends up being taken away and adopted. And so you have Leon going through all of these really hard things, and no one ever suggested or really got him the help that I think he needed. I think he needed a trained professional to help him, you know, with his thoughts and with his emotions and his feelings. And he ends up, you know, developing some behavioral problems that don't really get addressed either. And I felt like they kind of just let Leon, you know, slip through the cracks a little bit, and that was a little bit disappointing to see. And I don't know if it was the time period, because this book does take place in the 80s, so I don't know necessarily what social services practices were in place then, but I would have liked to see Leon have had a little bit more help and attention, especially with his mental health, than what he got. But overall, this book was okay. Next up is Bluebird Bluebird by Attica Locke, and this was one that I was looking forward to. In the end, it was just okay. I gave it 3 stars. I thought the writing was pretty good. The mystery was interesting, although it does kind of follow your typical mystery storyline. But I think for me, the biggest disappointment was Darren, and Darren is our main character, and he is a black Texas Ranger, and I don't know, I think I expected a little bit more from him, held him to a bit of a higher standard, and he did not live up to that. He was a mess, and I didn't really like him in the beginning of the book, and even towards the end, I still didn't really care for him. And also, there's a lot of racial tension in this book, which I knew going into it, but boy, is it too realistic. I think I spent a lot of the book kind of clenching my fists and, you know, trying to tell myself that this was just a work of fiction. But when fiction mirrors reality so well, sometimes it's hard to separate the two. And you have this small town of Lark, Texas, and this book, even though it's set in 2016, it feels like, you know, this town is stuck in the 1950s or the 40s, and you have white characters going around calling black characters the N-word, and there's not really any consequences or, you know, any kind of big reactions, and so that took me out of the story a little bit. And one of my favorite things about reading mystery novels is trying to figure out the whodunit. And I think because I was, you know, trying to control my emotions while reading, I didn't really have the time to try and figure out who did it. And so in the end, you know, it wasn't as interesting or as exciting as mystery novels usually are for me. Now, I will say the book was written well enough that I do want to read more of Attica Locke's work. And I do know that when I wrote my review on Goodreads, I mentioned that I was interested in continuing the series. I am not so sure about that now that I've had a chance to think about it, because I'm not really sure that I want to continue with Darren. But part of me does want to see how things go, if he gets better, if he matures a little bit. But overall, this was just okay. And the last book that I have to talk about today is Ninjarella, and this one is by Joey Kamau, and it's illustrated by Omar Lozano. And I haven't rated this one yet on Goodreads, but I'll probably end up giving it 3 stars. The storyline is fine. It follows the typical Cinderella storyline. It just makes a few substitutions here and there. The illustrations, for the most part, are really good. They're colorful. They're very detailed. I think the one thing that I was disappointed in is, if you look at Ninjarella, you would assume that both of her parents are white, and that's not the case. Ninjarella's mother is actually of Asian descent, and I don't know if this is supposed to take place in China or Japan or somewhere else, but there are a lot of heavy Asian influences throughout the story, but that is not reflected in the characters. They do include a few more Asian characters in the ballroom scene, but other than that, the characters don't reflect the culture that is represented within this story. And that is it for the books that I've read so far this month. I have quite a few that I want to try to get to before they're due back to the library, but I do feel like I'll probably be renewing a few of the books that I showed you guys in my TBR. But that is it for today, guys, and as usual, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, God bless. Bye. You know, his two best friends had moved away, and so he needed, you know, no, that's the wrong book.